First item is the BB Combs Bridge Authority. Marie Bostic and Julie Bowers and Justin Lackey.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Thank you for a moment to address you. I am the Executive Director of the Land Trust of North Alabama, and I wanted to share with you just briefly why the Land Trust has an interest in the preservation of the BB Combs Bridge. First of all, hopefully you're all familiar with the Land Trust, but just briefly, we are a member-run organization. We have over 6,000 acres that has been preserved. We've been in existence now for 27 years. We have 41 miles of trails on 5 nature preserves, and we are becoming more and more active in the community and taking on more and more adventures projects, you might say. One that we've been working on for about the last 6 months is a trail between Chattanooga and Huntsville. It seems like a natural thing to do. You have Huntsville as a growing economy and having more of a public recreation base, and of course Chattanooga, who has a rich history of being a model for outdoor recreation and revitalization, to connect those two growing southeastern cities with a trail connection just seems like a natural thing to do. There's much already preserved land between Huntsville and Chattanooga, and so we think that putting that together is very, very possible and could potentially be done in the not too distant future, although certainly not overnight. The BB Combs Bridge plays a very, very integral part of that plan because you have to get across the Tennessee River, and there are very few ways to get across the Tennessee River if you're not in a car or a truck. So the BB Combs Bridge would provide that pedestrian safe access across the Tennessee River to make that connection. Unfortunately, we don't build bridges to accommodate people on foot or on bikes. So this is really, really the key piece of making that trail a possibility. And that's our primary interest in that, in the preservation of the BB Combs Bridge. So not only would it be a great asset, in my opinion, to the city of Scottsboro for events and entertainment and activities, but it would be the long-term benefit for the region because it would provide this economic development opportunity. I've spent the better part of my life, the last more than a quarter century, so I'll date myself a little bit, working with the city of Huntsville. I was in the planning department all those years and ended my tenure as the urban development director and planning manager. So I've had the opportunity to work on projects somewhat like this throughout the city of Huntsville and Limestone and Madison County. And I have a real belief in this project and a real belief that ecotourism is the future of the economic development in this area, and I want to be a part of that, and I hope I have the opportunity to work with all of you on that, and to BB Combs Bridge and other projects as they make available. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, Julie.
Hello everybody, Mayor, City Council. It's a pleasure to be back down in the South at the end of January. I have to thank you for the lovely weather and the great presentation that I saw on Jackson County yesterday by Judge Graham, and who straight up called the BB Combs Bridge the first wonder of Jackson County. So that was a nice piece. And just learning more about the history was great. I just wanted to update you on some of Work and Bridges activities in the last year because we have done a lot of work. Some of that started with this project and are looking for a bridge in Pennsylvania. Work and Bridges has now completed 4 bridge inspection projects to provide real numbers to the state of Pennsylvania, PennDOT through Preservation Pennsylvania, and we're working on a contract for the next 3 years to provide those real numbers for their Bridges for Sale program. Secondly, we're contacted through that program by the DNR of Delaware to provide 5 bridges for a bridge park that they plan in the northern portion of Delaware. They have a Stanley steamer collection, and they want to be able to give people rides or have them bring vintage vehicles to this park. So we provided that concept plan to them, and we're expecting an RFP that comes out looking for an expert in historic bridges that can work from A to Z, from finding a bridge, moving it, providing the engineering for all of the loading and the specifications needed for any individual project, and moving on to the delivery of that bridge and erecting it on piers and for trails that are being provided by their own engineers. So I wanted you to know that we're not just out there doing this here, but we do believe that you have a really great treasure, and that we would like to see that work with an authority. And if you're to hopefully vote for that authority tonight, it would stop the demolition of the bridge. Because unlike what Judge Cramer said yesterday, the bridge doesn't have a couple of years. It has maybe a couple months. They are looking at potentially changing moving everything off the B.B. Comer Bridge and putting 2-lane traffic on the newer bridge so that they can continue on their construction schedule. So we really need to halt the demolition. Then you have all the time in the world to work out the authority and that the revenues stay here. And if you'll just, for one moment, the authority is where I started last year with you. I really felt like it should be a city authority or a city-county authority. There is precedent for that. And all the benefits will inure back to the county, and few of the liabilities, or the city. And any questions?
Ms. Bowers, have you had a project this size before?
The project that we're looking for in Delaware is close to $2 million.
Have you had a project this size in the past that you have executed?
No. But the size of the project doesn't necessarily. They all break down the same way in terms of how they're processed. And there are bridges of this size across the country that have been saved and that have become a real plus to the communities. And I guess when Marie contacted us through the Comer Bridge Foundation and our work with the National Trust, who you may have received a letter from, I'm not sure. Did they get that in? That was a big deal, and they believe in the project, and we were put in touch with a woman, I can't not remember her last name, from Chattanooga, who was very much involved in the Walnut Street Bridge there. And something everybody, oh, you'll never be as cool as Walnut Street Bridge. The one thing she told us is that that area was blighted when they started that project. And what you see now, the success of that project, I think is what you can see here in Scottsboro, and that it will be a big draw. Any other questions? Thank you.
Justin?
Just briefly want to say, one concern that was raised at the last meeting, and I already mentioned this to Councilman Smith, was the liability issue, and the code does protect the city from liability, any contracts that the authority would enter into. So if, say, the authority took out a loan, or if the authority entered into some kind of contract and for whatever reason it was broken, the city nor the county nor the state would be liable for that contract. And also, just to tell you, what we're looking for and hoping for and asking for tonight is that either the city would vote to establish the authority, or that the city would vote to establish a joint authority with the county, and that if the county did not agree to it, that the city would go ahead and establish the authority without the county. But that's something that I think had been mentioned to me after the meeting last time about possibility of doing a joint authority, and I'm okay with that, and would be glad to present that to the commission. But I would like to ask the city to go ahead and approve the authority, even if the county doesn't participate, simply because with such a short timeline, if the county did say no, then it would be difficult for us to get back before the council and get the authority approved before the demolition started. So that's what I'm asking for tonight, and I appreciate y'all's attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin, I have a question if you don't mind.
Sure, sorry.
You know, say the bridge is saved and we get down 2 years down the road and nothing really, it never really develops, okay?
Sure.
And then at that point, that bridge is going to have to come down. What happens at that point? Who's responsible if this authority doesn't do what you have in mind for it to do? Who would be responsible for bringing that bridge down at that point?
Sure. What we had always planned when we were looking towards ownership by the B.B. Comer Foundation, or the Comer Bridge Foundation, was that, the state had offered that if we did, whoever got the bridge, the demolition funds could be used to renovate and refurbish it and that kind of thing. Our plan all along was to set aside money from the demolition funds for the future demolition, kind of like a fail-safe, that if the plan didn't work, say, there's no interest in the bridge, everybody says, I don't want to go out there to the bridge, river's boring, I don't like the river, I don't like the bridge, or whatever, then, there's nothing going on out there, it's just a drain or whatever, the money would be set aside to go ahead and tear it down. That was our intention, and that would be what I would suggest that the authority do, if the project does move forward, is set aside, at least a chunk of that money for the future demolition in some kind of interest-bearing or income-producing account.
And what was that amount, do you know, that the state said?
The total amount, I believe, was in the ballpark of 1.2 million.
And that sounds.
Actually, it was 1.4 million on their bid, but the other bid on the project was 868,000 on the demolition, so those bids can change depending on.
So how much of that were you going to set aside? Have you given any thought to that?
I think that the funds that are, like Julie was mentioning, there was another bidder that was less, but
Gotcha.
the project was bid as a whole, the demolition and the construction of the last facility. And so, out of the 1.4 million, my understanding is they've spent a couple $100,000 of that in engineering and planning for the demo. So we were thinking $300,000 to $500,000, because we do know that it could be demolished for less than 1.4 million.
And then where would the difference in that money come from, knowing that 2 or 3 years everything's going to be more expensive?
Right, well, that's where we come from as far as some kind of income producing account that we would place the money in. We would hope that, it wouldn't fail the day after.
That's a pretty good return on your money.
Yeah, well.
300,000 or 400,000.
Yeah, we would hope that there would be a period of time, if that occurred, that, we wouldn't take it over one day and the next day say we give up and the money's not there.
Justin, we also have, the TVA has a request in that we have a catastrophic insurance policy every year, which I have approached the National Trust Insurance Program about. I don't have the cost of that yet because it's not a project, but in the interim, before that fund is completely in place, they want that same kind of assurance. And through James Adams, we have a letter of support of the project. They feel like they're the ones that would hold the responsibility on that liability of taking the bridge out more than anybody else. That ALDOT doesn't really have a place in that anymore, that TVA does, and that's what they've requested that would have to be in place.
So we'd have to make the same assurance as TVA, that there'd be some money set aside for that. And we've looked into the insurance aspect of it, so.
What was TVA's concern? I didn't get that.
TVA's concern was that if the bridge had to be torn down later, they might be on the hook for tearing it down, and so they wanted the same.
So they would be on the hook rather than the city, is that what you're saying?
That's what they're thinking. And I know that the city would
Not
be
your statement.
happy for that to be the case.
Yeah.
But, another thing is the chairman of the TVA board is, I think, on the board of directors for the land trust. Is that, he has been in the past or something? He's involved in it somehow? I know he met.
It's a good try.
He's met with the land trust. Yeah, he's met with the land trust of North Alabama. I think they tried to contact Mayor Potter, but he was out of office that day doing something else. But, I've dealt with, Mr. Rich, the chairman of the TVA board on the project. I've talked to him. I've talked to the general counsel for the Tennessee Valley Authority. So we've, I think we've covered all our bases with TVA.
And what is ALDOT's timeframe? What's the date that you're shooting for? What are you looking at?
Well,
I know you want to do it tonight, but
Sure.
What is ALDOT's date? All right, if it's not done by this date, it's not going to happen.
they haven't told us a drop dead date, but I know their plans, the contractor's plans were to start demolition before the end of 2014. So, we're already past their planned date.
I think their estimated completion maybe is the end of this year.
Right.
Is that what you hear, Josh, or
Or next spring.
the completion of the bridge? Okay.
My understanding is that in order to stay on schedule, the plan is to start demolishing the Comer Bridge before the new one's complete, which would put the traffic from Comer Bridge onto the, Bob Jones Bridge. So, I mean, that's what I've been told. I don't know if that's correct, so don't quote me 100% on that, but that's my understanding, is that the demolition would actually occur before the new bridge is open, or at least partially.
May I say something?
Yes.
I've been listening, and my biggest concern still is that if we do this, what you're asking us to do, control kind of leaves this panel and goes to that panel. But everything that I hear, including what I heard, is not solid. We're gonna get all this, we're gonna do all that, but there's never anything in writing, there's never anything that we can look at other than a conversation.
Right.
And that's very concerning to me, that we would relinquish the authority to do this to a group, and then if that group goes down, it comes back to us, because I don't care what anybody said here and says, if you fail, and no one else is around, the city's gonna have to do it eventually, as far as demolishing the bridge goes.
Right.
And we can't afford that. I don't think ever will we be able to afford that if we're gonna keep paving roads and we're gonna keep doing all the things that we've been doing for the last number of years.
Right.
And that's my biggest concern. Nothing is solid. It started with TVA and they gave you permission to put another bridge out there. And it's gone from there to everything is by word of mouth instead of in writing.
Oh, I'm sorry, we could have provided you the full proposal that we gave to AlDOT that specified all of the players. It is in design, it's a concept plan. We are eager to get into the design phase, but without having a yes, and as of last year, you were not interested in doing this, and now it seems that some of you all can see the benefits that this might bring to Scottsboro and not just the liability.
And to be honest with you, some of us can see the responsibilities that are cast upon our shoulders, and the possibilities that it could severely damage the city of Scottsboro financially if we had to do that. And again, I'm talking like y'all been talking. I'm just talking about what I think, and I think it's what y'all been doing. Talk what you're thinking.
From what David tells me, the code is such.
Now, he's talking about contracts and all kinds of things. I don't think he's talking about the ultimate final responsibility if you guys go bust if we do this thing. It's a big responsibility.
I can only speak for ourselves, is that we are willing to take on that responsibility.
You are, but you be gone. You be gone.
I showed back up.
Yes, ma'am, but you hadn't been here a year, I don't think.
Well, we've been working on this project for well over a year with the Comer Bridge Foundation.
Keith, we would obviously assert that anything you do has got a certain level of risk, but, somebody could sue the city because they got bid with a new dog park that's being built, and
That's true, you had insurance over that.
yeah, well, there's risk in anything that you do. So, I mean, I can't give you assurances that there's no risk to it. I'd be lying if I did. Anything we do, anything that we do is gonna have that, but our plan all along had been to set aside money that, we thought could be used for the demolition if it came to that.
But I'd venture to say you'd never be able to accumulate enough that would actually keep up with the rate of inflation and the cost of tearing it down, because every year it's gonna get higher and higher.
Right, well, the cost of scrap metal gets higher and higher every year too. I mean, there's other factors, but, I see your concern. I can't give you a firm answer because without owning the bridge, we don't have this stuff in writing because, nobody's gonna give us a contract on something that we don't own. Nobody's, it's a difficult position because we're working from hypotheticals for the last year, trying to prove, to everybody that can be done, and, we can't say, here's a contract, y'all just need to sign
And
it.
I understand that, but it's just as difficult for the city of Scottsboro and this council to take those same responsibilities, but and have the ultimate final responsibility if it goes bad.
I appreciate
which
it.
is very possible.
As an attorney, I deal with risks and stuff like that every day, and I can appreciate.
And I'm not trying to be a hard time.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm trying to weigh all this in my own mind and listen to people who talk to me.
We
And someone
think,
told me today that they reevaluated the cost of demolishing that bridge, and it was gonna be somewhere in several $1 million instead of $1.4 million or whatever.
yeah.
So, you know, we don't really know.
We think that the city of Scottsboro would lose a whole lot more if the bridge is demolished than if they save the bridge. I mean, we think the demolition of the bridge would be a huge loss. This is the last of 15 memorial toll bridges that were built in the 1930s in Alabama. We've got the only one. There are no more anywhere in the world. This is the last one. We think it's a piece of history. We think it's a piece of quality of life for the citizens of Scottsboro. I was talking to a local physician, I won't use his name because I don't know if he wanted me to, but he said it's a quality of life thing. He said there's precedent for this. You know, when the building that houses the Heritage Center was basically on the verge of ruin and being demolished years ago, that a group came to the city and said, hey, we've got this building, we want to turn something, you know, special out of that building, and the city did it. I mean, there's precedent for it because it's a quality of life thing, just like the dog park, the skate park, the water park, the rec com, the ball fields, the tennis courts. It's all, you know, quality of life. And beyond the historical perspective, I think it adds value to the community just from a quality of life perspective.
The Heritage Center, it was actually done through an independent vote.
Right.
That's the reason that board was created. I have a question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Have you talked with anyone with the county commission?
I've talked with Chairman Hodges on Friday about this, and Chairman Hodges, you know, can't speak for the entire commission. Obviously, he seemed open to the idea, and he said that if the city wanted to partner with the county, that he would like me to come and give a presentation to the commission. But like I say, he can't speak for the commission itself, but I have talked with him and made him aware that that was a possibility, and, you know, he was okay with the idea, but, you know, he's not the one that ultimately makes the decision on that.
He does set the agenda there.
He sets the agenda, and he is willing to hear from us. He said he would like to hear our presentation if the city wanted it to be a joint venture, you know.
I'm just curious, why did you come to the city instead of the county first?
Well,
What was the reason there?
we felt like that it was something that the city had been more familiar with. The city had been more involved with the project from the beginning. And the reason that we didn't propose that it be a joint venture from the get-go was the timing of it. We just wanted to, you know, we feared that before it could all be pulled together, the demolition would begin. And so we were trying to move as quickly and you know, without unnecessary delay as possible. Obviously, if that's the only option, then that is an option that we would prefer to look at over demolition. But you know, the city had been a little bit more involved. I think we've had meetings here in the past about this kind of thing. The ALDOT director came up and that kind of thing. So we just felt like this was a logical starting point. And I think, you know, ultimately, the city's got more control of the project because you guys have the license on the property at Dock Street, and that, without Dock Street, the project's dead because you've got to have Dock Street to access it, so.
Mr. Kennery, did we ever determine if it was in the city limits or not?
It's certainly the side near the nearest, on this side of the river it is.
To the edge of the bank and the.
Yes. The property, of course, underneath it is the river, and we don't own the river because it was acquired by annexation of property owners and not by legislative act. So it seemed logical to me to have this as a city-county kind of thing.
And that's fine, but I can mention this too. This is in the code sections that I provided at the last meeting. One of the requirements of the code is that the board of the authority shall create a tourism district or tourism development district. And it states in there that the entirety of the district does not have to be within the incorporated area of the municipality. In other words, you could create a district that goes beyond the boundary of Scottsboro, if the authority chose to do that, so.
One thing I forgot to ask you, really spoke in reference to the land trust. Are they gonna put money into this project?
The actual bridge, no, sir.
Our hope as far as the money on the land trust end of things is that if we needed help with raising funds for, say, a project, or, I don't know, just a random example, maybe put lighting on the bridge or something like that, that we could turn to the land trust and ask them to help us, put together a fundraiser or something like that. And I think, that being located or based out of a more populous area than Scottsboro, they would have a bigger, group of citizens to pull from for something like that. But that was our, hope, is that having them connected would open fundraising opportunities for us, not that they would just hand over a check to us. So.
Justin, I guess one of the things I keep hoping that I will hear, but I haven't yet, is a plan to generate revenue to provide for the long-term maintenance of the structure. And I haven't heard anybody, I've heard us say, well, we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this. I haven't heard anybody say, this is a plan to provide enough revenue to prevent what we're all talking about. And I guess that's my concern. One is approving an authority with a single purpose. I mean, you're talking about developing or creating a tourism authority for the purpose of the bridge, and that's not, if you do the authority, it needs to be for tourism and not for just the bridge preservation.
I agree.
But I still haven't heard a plan that's going to provide a way for this to be successful over the long run.
Sure. I'll take those issues up in turn. First of all, I think that the authority, if created, would not, have to be limited to a single issue. I would hope that it would be, either the entire city of Scottsboro, or if you partnered with the county, the entire county would be designated a tourism district. Because, we've got stuff to offer throughout the city and throughout the county. So I'm not advocating that we create this authority only for the purpose of saving the bridge. I'm advocating that could be one of the purposes. But, absent an authority, absent some government entity that could take control of the bridge will be demolished. There's no doubt there. The bridge will be demolished unless there's some government entity such as the authority to take the reins there. So I think that wide-ranging possibilities are out there for the authority, well beyond the bridge. That would just be one of the functions that I would propose to create it for. The other thing is, we've looked at, as far as the revenue stream, we've looked at a lot of different things. We were hoping potentially that if a private entity such as the Comer Bridge Foundation were to take control of the bridge, the Dock Street area would be something that could generate revenue for the bridge through, property lease to, say, a restaurant. We would hope to bring in a restaurant to that site, and that the revenue, from the lease to the restaurant would be one revenue stream. The other two things we were looking at was direct contributions, either through fundraisers or people contributing money. We've done some small fundraisers. The authority has Christmas ornaments, T-shirts. They've put collection containers out at different places, and they've raised between $12,000 and $15,000 just doing those small kind of things. But ultimately, that there would be bigger things. Some examples of some of the stuff, like the Low Country Luau that the Impact Learning Center does, those kind of events. And then direct contributions, either in-kind things like, for example, go to Home Depot and ask them to donate lighting materials, those kind of things. And then the other direction would be direct rentals of the facility. In other words, if somebody wanted to have a wedding on the bridge, rent it out for an event, kind of like people can rent out facilities in like the Redcom and, you know, the splash pad, I think, can be reserved on weekends, like on Sundays or something maybe, but those kind of things. Perhaps even that it would be a, something you could consider doing like a membership for, because it really is, the length of the bridge really is like a walking trail. I mean, it's something that people potentially might consider having a membership to go out there and use the facility. So I mean, there's a lot of different things that we've kicked around, vendors on the bridge, but it's kind of hard to put a firm plan in place when you don't have a place to do any of that. I know Working Bridges has done a lot of that work as far as coming up with ideas to raise the funds.
And you're absolutely right, without a revenue stream, there is no project. So, and one thing that Justin didn't mention is the toll. You know, if the people are coming off the trail, 50 cents, you know, there is a potential of making it also revenue bearing to go on the bridge. Unless you're a member and then you have a pass card.
So,
I know we beat this to death, but I have one more question, okay? You said without the dock street, it wasn't a viable project. Where you at on the TVA permits of getting the bridge across the slough there?
okay,
Because like you say, if you don't get that, then that kind of shoots the whole idea down.
sure. TVA has not given us any trouble as far as that, but we don't have
permit.
we don't have the permit because we don't have the license to dock street and we don't own the bridge, so you can't get a permit on property that you don't own. I mean, same thing, you could go to somebody else's lake lot and apply for a permit to build a boat dock on a lot that you don't own. But, you know, I've had personal conversations with TVA, like I say, the general counsel at TVA and the chairman of the board at TVA. And, you know, nobody has told me that this is a project that they would prevent. And I know that Julie Bowers has had in-person meetings and numerous phone conversations with, you know, various people at TVA, and nobody has put up a roadblock, but, you know, they can't permit something that we don't own, so.
And I also have a letter from James Adams that I can forward you all. I'm sorry that I didn't do that, specifying exactly what we have to do. And it is a standard permitting process to access that. The interesting point of that is that they don't have anything to do with the land under the bridge because Gunnersville Lake was flooded after the bridge was built. So it's very small. Mr. Adams also said that he has worked frequently with Mayor Potter and that he didn't see any impediments to the project, and he certainly understood what the $1 million view was.
You've gotten more out of him than I have, so that's good.
We took him on a boat.
We're gonna need to call you next time.
I will forward this letter to you, Mayor. And
Thank
then
you.
can
Does anyone have any other questions for Justin?
Thank y'all for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. Would y'all want to see this on tonight's agenda or wait until they get with the county commission? Is 2 weeks going to make that huge of a difference?
We believe so, yes.
We've been kicking this around for how long? And now we're down to 2 weeks.
Is it possible for us to add a contingent upon the county?
My understanding is they want it done, and if the county doesn't go along, then we do it anyway, so.
That's
That's
what they're-
my question is, what difference does it make?
That's the question.
That would be the best of both worlds, but, you know, we'll take what we can get respectfully. If it had to be contingent upon the county, we would rather have that than nothing, I can tell you.
I personally would want the county involved in it.
can you still vote then that you would accept it upon that contingency and put it on your agenda?
Consider that as a contingency.
I won't put that on tonight's agenda to vote on it. We can vote on it on the 9th, based on that.
Okay.
Okay.
And then what if the county says, well, we won't do it unless the city, you know, you're on different schedules?
I can tell you this, the county has a work session next week, so the earliest that the county could vote on it would be the 9th.
Well, we have a work session on the 2nd,
Right.
so we would know pretty close to where they would stand anyway, more likely.
Yeah, on the 2nd would be, when I would get on the agenda, for the county. So, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly what time they meet for work sessions, I think maybe 3 o'clock. Yeah, I mean, you would know that I had presented for sure.
Yeah. Look who we all.
That's just to consider.